The Universal One by Dr. Walter Russell. The Universal One, Volume 1, First Principles. Book 1, Chapter 5, The Process of Thinking. The action impulse and the reaction impulse of the thinking process are alternating between the apparent opposites known as generation and radiation. Generation and radiation are opposites which constitute the appearance of motion in opposition. Generation is the attractive, gravitative, positive, electric force, and radiation is the repulsive, emanative, negative, magnetic force. All motion, whether in opposition or in inertia, is in equilibrium. That is to say, the amount of energy expended in any two opposite swings of the cosmic pendulum is always quantitatively constant. The apparent variation is in the dimension of the two opposing swings and is not of the constant of energy. The amount of generative and radiative energies expended in the two opposing oscillations anywhere in the entire 10 octaves, when added together, total the same in the amount of energy expended. Motion in inertia is characterized by an absolute lack of what man calls valence, which is grabbing power or uniting power. All of the elements of matter in motion in opposition have this uniting power in varying degree or periodicity, just as they have periodicity in electromagnetic charge and other variations. Hence, a further reason for disassociating the inert gases or master tones from the elements. Opposing impulses of thinking are generated out of inertia and radiated back into equalization in inertia. These impulses are alternating between generation and radiation in a periodicity of preponderance, which periodicity is measurable by man in many ways. All matter is apparently evolving and devolving into the illusion of many substances of many dimensions. So-called solids of matter are variations of apparent states of motion, registering in form the idea of thinking mind, and sustained in their appearance as solids of matter by electric preponderance over magnetism. The electric nature of matter in its progressive periodicity and variation of electromagnetic charge, rotation of its light units and other periodicities will be written down with more exactness when the process of thinking is more explicitly written down and charted. Suffice it here to say that thinking is the electrogenerative action and magneto-radiative reaction of mind. Thinking is a simple process of very complex effects, the sequence of which will be written in its proper place. The electromagnetic opposition of mind, as expressed in the process of thinking, is the source of all of the energy of the universe. Thinking, then, is a process of generation of motion in variable opposition out of a state of maximum motion in non-variable inertia, and of radiation back again into that state. The inertial line is that hypothetical line of absolute non-opposition between the oscillations of the two opposing forces of motion. At the inertial line, the two opposing forces are neutralized and in equilibrium. At the inertial line, there is no force back of motion, but there is the impetus of the magnetic radiative pulsation, which continues motion across the inertial line without force. Once across the line, motion is continued by the electrogenerative pulsation until magnetic conquest causes it to rebound. That state of motion which continues motion without force back of it will be known as inertial energy. The inertial line or plane might be characterized as the axis along which wave expressions of the universal constant of energy are born. The mechanic might characterize it as the dead center between force and force where no force exists. This point can only be passed by the impetus given to an object in motion prior to its arrival at that point. Motion is continuous as thinking is continuous. The universe breathes, inhaling and exhaling as man breathes, and as every light unit, atom and molecule breathes, and as everything in the firmament above and the waters below breathes. Exhalation and inhalation in sequence is a characteristic of all phenomena of matter. Motion is caused by the sequence of opposing impulses of thinking. All direction of motion and effects of motion are governed by these equally balanced gravitative and repulsive and equally balanced decelerative and accelerative forces. The opposition of the two apparently opposing forces, which cause apparently opposite impulses, forms spiral waves, along which the idea produced in thinking is registered. The registered idea of thinking is expressed gravitatively in what man calls the elements of matter, and repulsively in what man calls the magnetic flow, or magnetic lines of force, in heretofore unknown magnetic orbits. All elements of matter are radiative or radioactive, just as all matter is generative or generoactive. Electrically generating elements and magnetically radiating lines of force are the same force exerted in apparently opposite directions. The former is centripetal, and its direction is toward the nucleal center of a closing spiral. The latter is centrifugal, and its direction is away from the center toward the opening spiral. Their difference is but a rising or lowering of potential. One always becomes the other. Each is the cause of the other. Radioactivity is a lowering of potential into higher octaves of elements of greater speed but lesser power. Note from New Laws and Principles Appendix. Unions of opposed actions and reactions are possible only within certain limitations. When union does not take place, there can be no reproduction. Generoactivity is the increasing of potential into lower octaves of greater power and lesser speed. Generoactivity builds the elements. Radioactivity tears them apart. The elements are composed of apparently separate particles in motion, which shall henceforth be called light units or corpuscles. The spiral generoradiative waves are the medium of reproduction of idea throughout the entirety of the universe. All idea of mind produced by thinking is reproduced throughout the entirety of the universe of mind in measurable waves of electromagnetic opposition. These apparently opposing generoradiative waves constitute the creating and decreating universe of integrating and disintegrating elements of potential energy, which man calls the created physical universe. Man has measured the speed at which the energy of light appears to travel along waves as 186,400 miles per second. This measure is the highest measure of the perceptible impulses of universal thinking. This is the measure of energy reproduction, which man calls the speed of light. Man's concept of the speed of light as being uniform is a wrong concept. To man, light is incandescent luminosity. To man, that which is not glowingly incandescent is not light. All matter is light. This universe is one of light. Solids of matter, heavy, dark, and cold, are as much light as flaming Arcturus. Luminosity is but a state of intensely unequalized and opposing motion, sustained in its state of unequalized motion by the generation of high pressures. It is but one state of the substance of mind in motion, a state which is within a limited range of electromagnetic charge, temperature, and opposition, a range which varies in intensity in each octave, but which runs the whole gamut of its limitations in the 10-octave cycle. Chart describing the electromagnetic process of mass formation. All mass is accumulated centripetally by the genero-active, gravitative, attractive power of electricity, and is dissipated centrifugally by the radioactive, repelling power of magnetism. All direction is curved. All motion is spiral. The law. Genero-active and radioactive lines of force depart from each other at 180 degrees. X is the gravitative center of rising potential. Inertial plane of equal pressures which lies between any two masses. Inertial plane of regeneration. The law. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. X is the generative center of accumulating mass. Mass is an accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. The greater the mass, the greater the potential. Mass accumulates inductively along the centripetal lines of closing spirals and is rotated by the impact of genero-active force. Mass dissipates conductively along centrifugal lines of opening spirals and is rotated by the expulsion of radioactive force. These opposite forces are the cause of rotation of mass. Incandescent luminosity is but the state of maximum opposition of the two apparently opposing forces, and a state in which radiative resistance to generation is at its maximum. a state in which contraction by maximum general active accumulation of time into power is resisting expansion by radiative dissipation of power into time, of which much will be written in its proper place. Incandescent luminosity is that state of motion which will be known as the high potential of a system or an octave. It is the meeting place of centripetal and centrifugal forces, of preponderantly male and preponderantly female, of maximum electromagnetic opposition, and it is the state of maximum registration of heat. It is the turning point where the power of electricity to generate mind substance into the appearance of form yields to the power of magnetism to radiate it back into the disappearance of form. Man's speed of light is the speed at which that state of motion in opposition, known as incandescent luminosity, appears to travel through those high octaves of integrating matter which man calls empty space, or the ether of space. This measure of light is but the high measure of a great range of apparent speeds. All of the elements of matter in all states of motion are but orderly and periodic variations of the one substance, light. As there are innumerable states of motion of the substance of light, so also are there innumerable so-called speeds of light. All of the elements of matter are spread out progressively in varying states of simultaneously decelerative and accelerative motion in opposition on the 10-octave waves, like successive tones of music. All motion in opposition is simultaneous in its opposition. The state of luminosity belongs to all of the elements and varies with the state of integration of each element. It is periodic and orderly in its variation, as the elements are periodic and variable in their integrative weight or mass. Matter is an appearance due to a preponderance of electric force. It disappears through a preponderance of magnetic force. Direction of increasing pressure opposition. Line of zero pressure. Direction of increasing pressure opposition. Line of maximum orbital opposition. Interelemental electric energy is simply an overbalance electrically and underbalance magnetically within each tonal system. These opposed and unequalized energies are locked into their respective states of opposition by opposing pressures. Inertia is the storehouse of the illusion of matter and form. External and internal pressures become one in inertia. The law. Opposition is a characteristic appearance of all effects of motion. There are no opposites. The totals of any two opposing forces added together make one. The law. Electric lines of force approach each other at 180 degrees. Line of maximum orbital opposition. Matter is an illusion of substance due to states of opposing motion of the two apparently opposite forces of the one substance. The illusion of form and solidity intensifies as opposition increases toward maximum opposition line. Matter disappears into the one primal substance when opposition is equalized by release of external and internal pressures. The law. Electric energy reproduces itself by induction and dissipates itself by conduction at an angle of 90 degrees to the lines of induction and conduction. Inertial line. The law. Magnetic lines of force depart from the line of direction of electric and also of magnetic force at 180 degrees. Matter which is apparently non-luminous is simply matter which has become sufficiently retarded generatively and sufficiently expanded radiatively to bring it below the range of motion in opposition, which produces the appearance of luminosity. All solids of matter are but integrated light, the generative units of which are sufficiently retarded in their motion, and their resistance to integration sufficiently extended in magnetic orbits to bring them below the range of the state of apparent luminosity. If you are finding value in my channel, please consider supporting me to bring you more quality productions by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Also, please share with your network, and if you are in a position to do so, donations are very much appreciated. And you will find a link to do this in the description box below. Thank you.